afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Brittany Dufilly. I'm the Educational and Outreach Coordinator here at Vertex. Today, we're going to have a great presentation from Ruby Lopez at WatchGuard. He's going to talk about WatchGuard Endpoint Security and give you some security updates and show you some things that WatchGuard has done with their new Endpoint Security Platform. We're going to pass this over to Ruby. Ruby, it is all yours.
Thank you, Brittany. Thanks for having me today. And let's get to our agenda. So we're going to start before we talk about the Q2 endpoint security platform update, the update that we released, the major update that we released to our platform last month. We're going to revisit the WatchGuard portfolio for a second, focus on our differentiation, and talk about the two core services that power our approach to endpoint security, and specifically to our endpoint detection and response offer. We're going to talk a bit about the agent architecture review, the modules that are available, how extensive, how we have the extensibility of being able to add additional functionality to the agent and to the core of the next generation antivirus or the endpoint detection response engines, or the combination that is our star product of antivirus and endpoint detection and response. And that will help us understanding a bit more specifically into center and put in context the platform update the platform update features that we're going to talk about. So what makes us different in our approach to endpoint security? We are going to be talking about, and probably some of you that know our solution or probably use it, keep hearing about this zero trust application service that powers our delivery of endpoint detection response. And what the zero trust application service is about, and we'll expand a bit more on that in a second, is essentially about implementing a way for only sanctioned, trusted applications to be executed in devices that we protect, with a goal, or with the goal, to reduce the possibility of executing yet unknown, unclassified code. So we want to reduce the possibility of unknown code, and thus unknown circumstances and potentially malicious circumstances deriving from the execution of unknown software. So we make it possible that endpoints that we protect, in a word, do not run yet unknown, unclassified code before we have a chance to look at it and determine that it is malware-free. That's what it is all about. And it's also about making it possible and making it feasible and easy to implement and maintain. So we're essentially talking about an allow listing approach rather than allow execution but inspect approach, which is a characteristic of antivirus and next generation antivirus platforms. Our mission is clearly, by adopting this zero trust posture and making it possible to implement zero trust on application execution at the endpoint, is to reduce the number of incidents to zero. And I'm going to show you some stats from our own lab that show how successful the zero trust application service and its delivery has been from our perspective in assisting us to deal with file-based malware. We're also providing endpoint data to our customers that we claim, and I'll stand behind it, our competitors are not even collecting, or most of our competitors may be collecting, but not at this level. This endpoint data, this telemetry that we keep talking about as well, is the prime matter that allows us to transparently deliver that zero trust application service to deal with file-based malware, and also allows us to introduce another very important service that I'll mention in a minute. But it's all about that telemetry. It's all about that endpoint data. The depth of that endpoint data is clearly differentiated and allows us also to introduce a complementary SOC model that may enable, and in fact, it enables larger organizations to introduce forensic tools. What are we talking about? So we're talking about organizations that have their own security operations center. They may have their own CM, and the fact that they can leverage that same endpoint data, that same telemetry to enrich their security posture or what they're trying to obtain and the indicators and the triggers that they have configured in their SOC through their CM or data analytics platform is what we are alluding to. And this in fact means that one of the modules we'll be mentioning is the possibility of delivering that endpoint data that, again, is the same endpoint data that we use to provide the core services as a stream of telemetry to a third-party platform. We call it seam feeder. It just doesn't, it doesn't feed CMs only. It works with standards, and it can feed a myriad of CM platforms, but also data analytics platforms. But the goal is clearly to allow organizations that have a more mature implementation of cybersecurity to introduce forensic tools that are enriched by endpoint data. That's essentially what it is about. And also, the second part of the core services that we deliver from this endpoint data, from this telemetry, has to do with what or how are we capable to deliver an endpoint security posture that deals not only with file-based malware, which we cover with the Zero Trust Application Service, but also with everything else. The living off the land vector, the lateral movement, trying to find people through the user behavior modeling, that those people that may be insiders or outsiders, but otherwise they are the ones that are driving the attack with their actions. All of that we deal with the second part of the equation. While we are worried about file-based malware with the Zero Trust Application Service, with the threat hunting service, which is at the core, again, of the way we do endpoint security, is how the threat hunting service is how we deal with those other vectors. And when I mean, or when I say these services are at the core, it also means that the Zero Trust Application Service and the threat hunting service, and this is also a differentiated factor, do not mean an additional premium cost, an additional premium license, managed service costs that's an add-on to endpoint detection response or endpoint protection detection and response licenses. They are part of the license. They are the core of the way we deliver endpoint security through those agents that we deploy to the endpoints that we protect. And that's very important to highlight as well, I believe. So looking at the portfolio and deriving from what we've been discussing, we start our portfolio with a next generation antivirus. So even before we discuss the core services, the endpoint detection response, extended visibility, and how we use that extended visibility, that telemetry to go far or to go further with endpoint security posture, it all starts with antivirus technology. It all starts, in fact, with next generation antivirus technologies, which are also at the core of what we deliver to that agent. So the idea is use the visibility, use the extended visibility and the telemetry to deal essentially, because this has many, many implications, with the unknown, while we can be extremely effective to still have an antivirus at the core of that agent to deal with what we know with certainty or with technologies that allow us to do heuristics, behavioral-based analysis, what we already know to be malicious with 100% degree of certainty or with a degree of approximation, we deal with antivirus technologies. So our proposition, in fact, and I'm going to illustrate that in a second, to be at the combination of these two worlds, the next generation antivirus and what else we can do with those services that power our endpoint detection and response approach. So we can have an antivirus, in other words, and that's what this EPP means, that can for example, run alongside an existing endpoint detection and response product, but we can also have the opposite. We can have that zero trust application service and the threat hunting capabilities as an EDR standalone product, as an EDR standalone configured agent that can do endpoint detection response and have a third-party antivirus product installed alongside it. So we can do either antivirus with a third-party endpoint detection response product, or we can do endpoint detection response alongside an existing endpoint security or next generation antivirus product without obviously contending with it. So our agent and our technology was built from inception to be able to accommodate these two scenarios. And that's part of the flexibility we want in delivering our antivirus technology on one end, and we can deliver it standalone, and our endpoint detection response associated services, which, as I just mentioned, we can deliver in standalone mode as well. But the EPDR that you probably heard about, if you heard about the WatchGuard Endpoint Security offer, is in fact a combination of both. So we're delivering the same exact agent, but we are turning both layers or having both layers working concurrently. The next generation antivirus and our endpoint detection response technologies and services work in tandem in that scenario in each endpoint agent that we deploy. That's what we call EPDR, endpoint protection, detection and response, and that's our star product, if you will. All of this is managed through the WatchGuard Cloud, our unified security platform. So it's about visibility, it's about license tracking, it's about configuration of the service or the products and the services, whether it is just the antivirus, just the EDR, or the combination of both. And our coverage is currently Windows, Intel, and ARM CPUs as well, Linux, Mac OS, both Intel and Apple Silicon architectures, Android, and one of the updates that we are going to be talking about is in fact our iOS agent that we just released. So we have since last month an iOS product, an iOS protection as well. So inside, outside of the network, obviously branch offices, remote workers, because it's all cloud-based. All components are cloud-based, except obviously for the agent, the sensor that we deploy to each endpoint. So to summarize, our proposition is in fact combining endpoint protection in a sense of endpoint, that layer of next generation antivirus. We're talking about signature-based technology, very effective, very fast, not performance impacting, obviously, at all. We're not running any, and we're not in fact doing it with endpoint detection response either, but we're not running micro sandboxes and endpoint. We are utilizing technology that is really good with known malware and variations of techniques that we already know, and reporting on that, obviously. With the endpoint detection response piece, we bring big data, we bring machine learning, we bring technologies that leverage, and services first and foremost, that leverage that visibility, that depth of data that we collect at the endpoint to go further than that and deal with or implement whitelisting on application to execution and to provide real-time threat hunting. And we can combine both in a single agent in that EPDR offer, but we can still maintain the ability to either deliver antivirus, next generation antivirus on its own, and endpoint detection and response standalone. So, and zero trust application service, it's about dealing with file-based malware. It's based on classifying all running programs, all running processes, in fact, that run in our in endpoints that we protect. So the goal is that no application, no process, no library gets a chance to execute unless it is trusted. So we have the ability to suspend the execution of any yet unknown, unclassified items, and to only allow that code to execute after we typically in minutes, determine that that binary that we've never seen, not in that endpoint, not in that client, not in the millions of sensors that we have out there, that's it will only execute after we determine that it's good. So if, and in most cases, we classify binaries in minutes because we have a way, or we have several ways, in fact, to automate that analysis and automate that determination. But if the automated system cannot decide, and that happens in 0.02% of every file that we receive daily, we have malware analysts. So there's an analyst and service component to this. That's why it's a zero trust application service. So it's not only technology driven. There are actual analysts that will reverse engineer the code, and all that it happens, sandbox it, do static analysis, and all of that will happen or will be delivered as a service, and all, in fact, all the rest of the service and all of the automated analysis that's performed on the file, it's performed outside the endpoint. So we transparently upload a copy of that yet unknown, unclassified binary that we just suspended, along with that telemetry that allows us to determine where did that file come from, how did it get to be on that endpoint, and we're going to classify it 100% outside the endpoint. So administrators don't have to investigate anything, and this is the point, and administrators don't have to make decisions on whether we're going to determine that that executes or not. We are going to do that and deliver that as a service because we will be the ones doing the heavy lifting of that determination and of all that process. But keep in mind that we get 400 to 500,000 files a day, and 0.02% is still something that is, it's still an interesting amount of files that actually go through an analyst. But when files go through an analyst, you typically would not want those files executed in the endpoint. It's, in a word, it's that they are bad. We're just determining how bad they are. But it's important to keep in mind that it's not just, again, about technology. There's a human component to this, if you will. But it's about dealing with file-based malware. And if we look, and I want to center exactly what we're talking about here. If we look at the trends in the number of infections in endpoints with WatchGuard Endpoint Security, well, first with Panda and now with WatchGuard Endpoint Security, since we released the Zero Trust Application Service originally in 2015, in the end of the, or in the beginning of the second quarter of 2015, we see clearly that it has been solving the problem of file-based malware for us. So the fact that our clients are implementing allow listing and not allowing yet unknown unclassified files to execute because we made it possible with the Zero Trust Application Service has had a tremendous impact on the number of file-based infections that reach our labs. And you see the numbers, the trend in the numbers, and how low it has been from 2019 and 2020 on. But this is based not on us having a crystal ball of any sort. It's just because Zero Trust is implemented. We don't give that potentially malicious code a chance to execute. We suspend it before we have to deal with the consequences of an infection. And as early as 2018, Gartner, in the Magic Quadrant for Endpoint Protection Platforms, was recognizing the potential of this technology by saying that Zero Trust Application Service can drastically reduce the threat service of endpoints. But it's about making it possible. It's about its management not being burdensome for the administrator. And that's where we excel with this Zero Trust Application Service. And then there's where we actually have our money now, and where we focus our research and development efforts. Everything that is not, since we got the file-based vector under control, everything that it's not about that, namely living off the land, fileless attacks. What happens when devices are compromised without using malware, without using files? This is the concern, and this is where we are at with the zero trust, with the threat hunting service, as opposed to the zero trust application service. So in this case, we're worried about finding attackers that are using those living off the land techniques. We are scoping for lateral movement. We are looking for compromised credentials, and we're going to get to the malicious actor, to the person that is behind these attacks, these actions with user behavioral modeling. And we're being very proactive at this, not only by using indicators of attack and issuing alerts around indicators of attack that we already have loaded in our backend, but we are constantly using our data lake of 12 months of endpoint telemetry, the same data lake that you will have for all the managed devices in case you are our client. We're going to have that for our entire community to be able to be running hypotheses against that data lake and developing, in fact, constantly developing new indicators of attack. In case of validated breaches from our threat hunting service, the cybersecurity team notifies the customer. They can notify them through the product itself and its reporting mechanisms. So you'll get real-time alerts, you get an email, you'll get whatever you have configured for real-time alerting. We're going to issue reports in the management console of EDR or EPDR, but in case it's a highly customized indicator of attack, or in case what we're seeing is very specific in nature, we are going to reach out via support, and we are going to deliver a customized report, which may be a lot more detailed even than what we will show in the product itself. So it's a real service. Again, it's not just about technology. It's not just about a product feature that we call a service. It's something that relies on our actual backend team and our security analysts in our threat hunters in the backend, and the capability they have to even issue, like I mentioned, highly customized reports. These services, again, are the core of the way we do endpoint detection response. They're part of the licensing for our endpoint security products. And the extensibility of the architecture. So not only we can have that that base product, with whether it is what we call EPP, the next generation antivirus, or an EDR standalone agent, or the combination of EPP and endpoint detection response. So where we add that layer of zero trust application service and threat hunting service combined, we can extend the agent and the architecture of the solution even further with allowing, I mentioned 12 months of a data lake. We can have, even if you do not have a CM or a data analytics platform, we can have you doing lookups, creating reports from that 12-month time period for all your managed endpoints and their endpoint activity. You're going to be able to look at files, going to be able to look at sockets and network sockets activity, going to be able to look at trends in user utilization or user login, a myriad of data that we utilize, again, to provide those core services, but you can utilize for many, many different purposes. So if you don't have a CM, if you don't have a data analytics platform, you can extend functionality with this module we call Advanced Reporting Tool. We also do patch management. You can have an add-on that will allow you to do patch management for OS patches and for hundreds of third-party vendors. We also facilitate full disk encryption management with BitLocker from our own product, from our own agent. So we are able to deploy encryption policies, we're able to manage them, we're able to host and manage the encryption keys, and we are able to combine that with all the other modules, and we're able to deliver that with the next generation antivirus, with EDR, or with APDR. And last but not least, if you have that CM, that data analytics platform, that third-party data analytics platform, and you want to enrich your CM, if you want to enrich your security operation center approach with the telemetry data that we collect from the managed endpoints, CM Feeder is the module for you. So it will enable our backend to stream the endpoint telemetry in real time from the devices we're managing for you into a third-party CM or data analytics platform. So with that in mind, let's look at what we added with the Q2 Endpoint Security Platform update. So the new platform release includes the following enhancements. So we're going to be talking about, and I mentioned it already, support for iOS devices. We have sort of closed the loop in multi-platform support with being able to deliver an iOS protection product. We're going to be talking about shadow copies, how we use shadow copies to prevent ransomware with a site technology that doesn't necessarily have to rely on EDR and can be complementary to our EDR or to our next generation antivirus approach. We're going to be talking about decoy files, which is also which also pertains to an anti-ransomware approach. Enhancements in file encryption, in full encryption in our BitLocker management with better recovery key search, patch management improvements as well. We're going to be talking about VPN validation, the secure VPN feature, as we call it, for host enforcement, a feature we're actually porting from our TDR product and bringing it into our endpoint security products and some other initial changes. So let's talk about iOS. With this new release, you can download a client app from the App Store, and you can integrate WatchGuard Endpoint Security or a solution for iOS devices into your managed devices. So there are several ways to install or how you're going to be managing that app with what is called an MDM, a mobile device management profile. And we recommend, or we offer the full feature set if you download and maintain an MDM profile, which is downloaded from our console. So MDM solutions use software as a component to provision mobile devices, and they typically also offer protection features for device applications, data, and content. And that is to say that if you are using a third-party MDM platform to manage your iOS devices, we can integrate with it, or we can offer our own MDM profile and allow a full feature set. So the feature set will include, and that's included already, location, remote alarm, hardware inventory, web protection, anti-phishing, web access control, so productivity categories, you're going to see that in a second, but also wipe, lock, and software inventory features, which are, as you see, only available if you're using our MDM. These determinations you can install with no MDM profile at all, but that will limit you to just device location, remote alarm, and hardware inventory, because for the other features, you will need an MDM profile to be deployed to the device. Whether it is, like I mentioned, our own MDM profile, or if you have a third-party MDM solution, you can still get the web protection, phishing, and web access control by integrating our solution with that third-party MDM. So that won't get you all the features, but it will get you the integration with the third-party MDM. And this happens not by our choice, but by a determination that is mostly about what Apple or the framework that Apple allows for the MDM profiles. So typically, and that is to say, typically endpoint security solutions that have support for iOS will follow these same rules regarding the feature set that is available without the deployment of any MDM profile, of the MDM profile that is deployed by the same vendor that provides the endpoint security solution, and how you can integrate with an MDM that is not of the same vendor of the endpoint security solution. So these features and how you can achieve getting these features what the different options are, and that's my point, fairly standard amongst between vendors, endpoint security vendors and MDM vendors. So we're going to support iPad OS 13 and later, and there will be, you'll find the new platform a whole new section with policies for iOS devices that you can look at. So if you go to settings, mobile devices, you'll see not only Android, but now a new section where you can deploy iOS protection profile. So let's look at custom profile. So antivirus will web browsers, malware URLs, phishing URLs, anti-theft protection, report or not the device location, and a privacy setting, and also category filtering, category-based, productivity-based filtering, which if you're familiar with WatchGuard Endpoint Security, you'll see that this has exactly the same layout, it's exactly the same UI as the corresponding feature for other platforms, for namely Windows devices. Shadow copies. So shadow copies is, when we talk about shadow copies in the context of our upgrade, we're talking, in fact, about the Windows shadow copy feature. So it's included in the Windows operating system and can create snapshots of computer files even when they are being used. What are we adding? We are adding the ability to enable shadow copies that are managed by our agent. And when the shadow copies are managed by our agent will retain up to 7 copies of the file at any given time with a percentage of disk utilization that you can configure, and you cannot delete a shadow copy created by endpoint security or by WatchGuard Endpoint Security. Why? Because we are not only managing a separate repository for the shadow copies that we manage. That is, if you have regular Windows shadow copies, they can still be there, but the ones that are managed through our product are going to be on a different repository, and we're going to apply anti-tampering technology to those shadow copies. And that's the same anti-tampering feature we utilize and leverage to protect our own endpoint security agent processes. So to prevent them from being disabled, from being tampered with, from being deactivated, from files being deleted, even by administrators. So that same anti-tampering technology we use to protect our agent, we are going to extend it to protect these shadow copies that we manage and maintain on a different, excuse me, on a different repository. So to restore the previous version of a file in case you need it, you can use the regular Windows shadow copies native Windows feature. So we are going to be, our management of shadow copies will be completely transparent to the operating system. So if you need to restore a file, you can just use the native Windows feature. And the feature itself, shadow copies that is available in Windows Vista or later on Windows 2003 server and later. So whenever it is, or whatever the shadow copies feature it is supported, our management of the shadow copies feature will be as well. So to configure the shadow copies, it will be part of a per computer settings profile. It's going to be real easy. So we're going to go to settings, per computer settings profile, and you will notice that you have a shadow copies option here. So we can start, you can activate it by enabling our shadow copies repository and our management of those shadow copies. The only thing you have to configure is the percentage of disk space that is allocated to, or the maximum, not pre-allocated, but the maximum space that can be allocated to the shadow copies that we manage, which by default is 10%. Again, we're just utilizing and leveraging the shadow copies, the Windows shadow copies feature to manage it and to protect it with anti-tampering in case of ransomware, you need to utilize this journaling, in this case, the shadow copies feature, to recover a previous version of a file. So we're basically intelligently managing shadow copies, this native shadow copies feature, and we are adding an extra layer of protection to those shadow copies. The shadow copies feature goes without saying is part, or this improvement is part of EPP, our antivirus delivery, EDR, and EPDR. So any of the products in the WatchGuard endpoint security portfolio that we are looking or just looked at will have this feature. Same goes for decoy files. Decoy files are about detecting ransomware as well. So we place some files that we keep monitoring in locations, in key locations in the file system, and in case that we detect that decoy file is being modified in any way, we are going to identify that process and we are going to kill the process. So those files are quote unquote data files. So we interpret modification of those hidden decoy files as a ransomware attack, and we are going to kill the process that tampers with it. So again, it's an additional layer. It's not something that replaces any of the advanced endpoint protection features or any of the services that derive from our endpoint visibility. It's just another layer of protection that can be utilized, that can be leveraged in the endpoints. And again, it will be available for EPP, EDR, and EPDR. So we labeled decoy files. It's a setting of the antivirus. So if we go to the antivirus settings, workstations and servers, under antivirus, there's a new section, create decoy files to help detect ransomware. And that will place, by activating this option, you'll plant, so to speak, the decoy files and enable the feature that will allow killing any process that tries to modify them. Secure VPN, so the host enforcement features. So you in settings and network services, going to be part of the network services, you can now enable and configure the setting that corresponds to the host enforcement feature that comes from TDR. So the ability to not allow VPN connections through Firebox to be, in this case, to be started if either the antivirus or the advanced EDR protection, what we call the advanced protection, is disabled. So you won't be able to connect if either the antivirus or the EDR features are disabled, or if the protections are in error, or if there's something wrong with the engines where they are not properly functioning, you won't be able to connect to the VPN. So there's two sides to configuring this. One side is on the Firebox, so you need to utilize the host sensor enforcement feature as part of the threat detection in the Firebox, and then you have to configure the corresponding feature in EPDR, EPP, or EDR. So we'll find it under network services, where we have WatchGuard proxy, cache discovery features, the secure VPN. And what you need to do here is to pair the account UUID and the authentication key that you have from TDR or that you already have configured in the Firebox. It needs to match what you have in the Firebox, so the feature can be enabled. You do not necessarily need to have TDR for this feature to work. You can just use a third-party account UID generator and an authentication key. Of course, we recommend it to be complex. We just need to pair and make it match with what you configure in the Firebox for the feature to work. So you are able to configure, or you will not be able to connect if either the antivirus again or the advanced protection features are disabled, whether they are disabled by configuration or they are disabled because there's an error status coming from the endpoint agent, and there's also a way to determine that there needs to be a minimum operating system version for the connection to be carried out. For example, you can set that you want allow connections if the endpoint does not have Windows 10 as a minimum. So that's another feature that can be configured alongside the activation of antivirus or EDR features host enforcement side of things. So how you configure it, and we're gonna change things and make it a bit different in FireWare 12.9. But for now, you can configure it exactly in the same place that you configured the corresponding feature for TDR. So you got to pair that authentication key and that UUID with what you fill in the secure VPN feature in the EDR or EPP console. So just got to make them match. So the Firebox or the agent can talk to the Firebox through the VPN connection or after the VPN connection is initiated. Full encryption. We have been having a lot of requests to make recovery key search easier. So we are able with the full encryption module to make to facilitate the management of BitLocker, of Microsoft BitLocker. That is to enforce the encryption policies, to enforce the options in those encryption policies, but also, and more importantly, or almost as importantly, to keep build our repository of recovery keys. So in the new platform version, it's much simpler to do a recovery key search. With mainly what we bring to the full encryption is we facilitate from any point in the full encryption management, whether it is you are at device level, or whether you're at the reporting or dashboard level on the full encryption side, you can search for recovery key. So in the past, searching for a recovery key, it's something that you would need to associate the recovery keys with the devices themselves. So you'd only have good searching facilities at the device level. Now, from any level, you can search for a recovery key and you can find out the device it is assigned to. And what we're doing on the patch management, just the main enhancements we're doing on the patch management side. So you're going to see that in the patch management, you'll find a dashboard that is oriented in the patch management dashboard. You'll find a new section with 2 tiles, which is oriented at most available patches for computers. So the volume of the number of computers that are missing a patch, and you can configure several filters around that, and computers that have more lacking patches. And that takes you to a filter that allows you to make that group of computers or those computers that are in a situation where they're missing more patches, the target of patch management task that will, of course, solve the problem. So we're going to also be able, from the patch management filters, to allow you to select specific programs, specific vendors, and specific versions. So if you're looking to know if you are lacking a specific version of Java, you can, from the patch management inventory, now with just 2 clicks, choose Java, choose a version that you're looking for, and you can find out if you are lacking the deployment of that version, if you are under that version and you need to deploy it right away. And again, you can multi-select from that filter, and you can start a task patch deployment task from there to immediately, or in a scheduled fashion, deploy that patch. And last but not least, we are adding a feature that allows you to target for the purposes of running antivirus scans or deploying patches, an additional filtering facility that is focused on the type of device. So you can choose an entire group, which could be in a department, but you can filter out that patch deployment will only be carried out for a workstation, or for a laptop, or for a server, or for a combination of these, or any combination of these. So We are going to be able to inside a group organization that is not, as it may not be, and it's often not, based on the type of device. So we don't necessarily force anyone to build groups based on the type of device. That's a determination that the agent can figure out what type of device is. So it only makes sense that if you want to deploy um, a patch or a set of patches or a patch, determine a patch or configure a patch window to a level of the organization, but only for workstations or only for servers, that you're allowed to do so. So you can do that now very easily with Filter. And that's it. These are the main enhancements that you can have access to with the latest platform upgrade. One word about the upgrade, though. We perform upgrades in a phased fashion. So you are going to be. We started deploying the first set of tenants, or upgrading the first set of tenants immediately upon release. But if you are a client, it may happen that you're going to look for these new features. You're going to look for these new options on the administration console, and you still don't have them because you still haven't received the update. We do it in phases. If you are interested in any of the features that we mentioned today, you can open a ticket with support and explicitly ask for your platform to be updated to the latest platform release, and they will do it for you in anticipation of when you're going to get that platform upgrade in the stage you're at, or you'll be positioned in or at in the phase migration. So you can at any time request a new platform upgrade via support.
Perfect. Thank you, Rui. And we
Thank
greatly
you.
appreciate WatchGuard. We've got a couple other people from the WatchGuard team on here with us as well. Just a few weeks ago, we were announced that we became one of the platinum partners for WatchGuard. So we were very excited about that announcement. There's only 23 in the country, so it's a great honor. We couldn't have done it without our customers and the support that you guys give back to them. And with that, Cameron from WatchGuard said there's only 23 worldwide, not 23 in the country. Sorry about that. Thank you, Cameron. And with that, we'll give you guys back that rest of those about 8 more minutes in your day. And thank you again, Rui.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.